OrangeWIP is a multimedia company that exists to fill the gap along the entrepreneurial journey from ideation and confusion to information and capital. Today, I talk with the founder of OrangeWIP, Jennifer Sutton, for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Jennifer Sutton, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. I know that you are a well-respected and award-winning businesswoman with your own multimedia company, OrangeWIP, which exists to fill the gap in the entrepreneurial journey from ideation and confusion to information and capital. Who is Jennifer Sutton these days as a businesswoman?
Ooh, who am I these days?
Yes,
I founded my marketing company, Brightco, in 2013. That was my first kind of toe dip into the entrepreneurial space. And then because I really related to the struggles of founders and entrepreneurs at the local level, I thought it was maybe a Greenville, a local problem. But
Right.
The more that I talked to different entrepreneurs and innovators across the country, it was the same things that kept popping up. I feel isolated. I want a community. I don't know how to navigate my local resources. I don't see myself in the entrepreneur ecosystem within my own community because they only champion, 3 to 5, key people, and they don't necessarily they're not necessarily the most diverse. I just thought, how I feel that I have that pain. So I launched OrangeWIP last year, and we are a independent, hyper local media platform that's multimedia to serve the founders and entrepreneurs. We're in 3 locations, so Greenville, Charleston, and Columbia.
Sure.
And it's really a content hub that is part storytelling. It's a navigation guide. We have a dynamic resource directory. We have a curated events calendar. And, that's where I am. I am excited because I feel like I've created something that solves a problem. I'm also in that startup phase of I've developed a product. I'm trying to get the word out. Because I'm excited about it. I want my customers to feel equally excited about it. So just trying to get that of what we're doing, getting it out there, and getting people equally excited about what we've built, that I am. So that's where I am.
In generalities, Jennifer, what is that entrepreneurial space these days?
What do you, in terms of what does it look like, or?
Yeah, I know you mentioned in the last answer about the entrepreneurial space. What is that like?
So
from your perspective?
Yeah. So entrepreneurial space in like a local market, we call it the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And that's really needs to be owned by the entrepreneurs and the innovators in that market. And it's where different organizations like economic development organizations or economic development service organizations, like in Charleston, it's the economic development, Charleston Economic Development Organization, the chambers.
Right.
It's also the universities.
Sure.
MUSC is involved in that.
Sure.
There's incubators and accelerators that are really kind of come together to help serve the entrepreneurs, to help them scale and grow. But to reason why we were created and what was the problem that we've solved is look at it from the founder and the entrepreneur of we're head down in our space, right? We are head down working on our business. And sometimes we don't, get a breath up to go, how do I scale? What are my challenges? Where do I know, but when we do look up and go to an event, it becomes almost overwhelming to navigate and go, should I be in an accelerator? What's the benefit? Am I, if there's multiple ones in a market, which one? because they're time consuming. It's like, time, money, and resources is precious. So where should I put that energy? Or what organizations like there's SBDC, which is the Small Business Development Council, that offers a lot of resources, but a lot of entrepreneurs don't know either they exist or how to approach those organizations to go, I need help. If you need capital and funding, VCs, the venture capital, and the whole conversation around the business of money is even overwhelmingly confusing. And then there's like the patents and how do you protect your idea? How do you protect your product? And just work through that process. It can become overwhelming. You don't know where to turn. And that's where OrangeWIP kind of comes into play to go, we have organized and collected and curated all these resources together and try to tell stories through the founder's eyes to simplify it, to clarify, to help them be more comfortable to navigate, because it's an isolated and scary world out there.
So let me ask you, what have you simplified and clarified thus far with OrangeWIP?
So for the entrepreneur, we have built a dynamic, what we call resource directory that's filterable. So if you're a founder, you can come in and go, where am I in my stage of my business? Am I a startup? Am I a scale up? Do I need to exit? Like maybe I'm ready to exit and I'm looking for how to find a seller.
Right.
Or excuse me, how do I find a buyer?
Right.
And then you can filter it by like that, like I said, your business stage, or you can filter it by what you need. And it's a double filter. So if you're a startup and you're like, I need capital, it will present all the resources. And then we've tried to define and talk about those resources in a way that makes it really easy for that entrepreneur to go, aha, I get it now. I can go into these organizations and have these conversations around these topics. So that's one. The events calendar. We go into a market. So like Charleston, there's probably 10, 15, maybe 20 calendars, from the chamber, from incubators through different business media outlets that all have these events, or perhaps it's deadlines for applications for incubators or accelerators, or maybe grant deadlines for free money. And we have that all curated in an events calendar that you can go in to go, oh, these are all the deadlines or events and milestones that I need to pay attention to in a given week or a month. So we're trying to simplify that for that entrepreneur so that they have, I call a one-stop place.
Yes.
To get all their information. And then we tell stories. We highlight and feature a diverse spectrum of entrepreneurs where we are, I call it getting the nitty gritty, that real world of, what are you struggling? How did you overcome that struggle? Don't just say, well, I had the secret sauce, or, I had a process that I worked through this. We want to know what that process is. We dive deep so that people can be inspired, or informed or motivated to go, if they can do it, I can do it.
And I want to talk to you more about that in depth in just a second, Jennifer. But let me ask you, You talked about those resources. What resources have you defined easily with your platform?
So there's multiple ones that we've defined. There are in each given market. So Greenville, there's about close to 80 resources that are in our directory, and it's growing every day. Charleston, there's close to 70 different resources. And again, we've segmented out based on what's the purpose do they serve that founder and entrepreneur. So we're kind of dusting off the agendas of a lot of these resources because they've got their own shareholders or investors. And we're kind of going, no. What do you have specifically for the entrepreneur and the founder. And so really through clarifying those viewpoints, putting them into a filterable, discoverable directory that's super easy to use, trying to make shortcuts for them. And then, the direct connections are there, whether it's, the who should you be contacting at these organizations, or, website and contact information.
So what are those viewpoints exactly?
So, as in the agendas, or
Exactly
which
right.
viewpoints?
Exactly right. Just as you mentioned, the agendas.
The agenda. So, every one of the, I would call economic development organizations or municipalities, even incubators, accelerators, a lot of them have, an agenda. Yes, they're serving the founders and entrepreneurs, but they also have shareholders and investors that have, a broader mission or agenda of we're here to build the local economy. And sometimes their information and the resources they have available for just founders and entrepreneurs gets lost in that. So take like a university, like MUSC. They've got a great innovation division, but a lot of like the local founders and entrepreneurs might go, oh, well, they're probably just focused on healthcare, or it just must be in medical or bioscience or life science. But there might be resources that MUSC offers just to help the broader entrepreneur and the founder accelerate. Like I said, we kind of shed all the other stuff away so that we're really hyper-focused on what does that local resource, what can they do for that local founder and entrepreneur? Is it education? Is it space? Is it like SBA lending and capital? And like I would call traditional funding? Is it venture capital funding? And how do you navigate that? Is it angel investor? And what are they looking for? Do they have a special niche that they are looking for? There's a lot of VCs that in their websites and their conversations, it's very general and broad. But when we get to it, like, oh, you're just really looking at, investing in bioscience, or you're really investing in tech, or you're looking for, in Charleston, there's a fund group that is for minority and women-owned businesses.
Right.
So we want to make sure that those are amplified, so that we're making we're the connective tissue between those organizations and resources that have something to offer that founder and entrepreneur, and how do we connect them to that founder, the right founder and entrepreneur, because then they both elevate. And that helps the local economy, right? If I can get these entrepreneurs and founders to be better informed, to be better educated, to navigate the waters around startup, scale up, creating an enterprise, or preparing an exit, that entrepreneur goes from being, a solopreneur to then hiring 5 people, to hiring 50 people, to hiring 250 people, or, a fast startup, a high impact entrepreneur might have an idea and it's, they get funding and they go from 10 people to 300 or 500 really, really quickly. That is great for that local economy, right? That helps infuse that helps nurture and make that innovation economy super thriving.
Well, let me ask you this, Jennifer. Obviously, you're located in Greenville, and you also have locations in Columbia here in Charleston. So, how many scale-ups do you have? How many startups do you have? And how many fast startups do you have?
So, we don't monitor our subscribers that way. It's really we're looking at anybody that fits that model of entrepreneurism, whether you are a startup, scale up. But we're, as we've just been around since last May, we're just trying to get our word out of enjoy our content, enjoy the curated directories and the events calendar. and, sign up and subscribe. We also do our podcast that's weekly. That's Hello Chaos. That is, we have conversations with founders and entrepreneurs across the country. We distribute it locally, but it's really conversations with, entrepreneurs and founders all over.
Sure.
And we like to say we're exploring the messiness that in the chaotic minds in our worlds of being a founder and entrepreneur. But we don't monitor, hey, we're tracking so many startups or so many scale ups, because our content is that diverse. Of if you are a startup all the way to trying to figure out your exit, our content will help you.
So let me ask you then, Jennifer, what is the conversation right now about startups and scale ups?
The conversation around it, it's it's a good time for being a startup and a scale up, especially I would say in South Carolina. There's a lot more innovation that's happening. A lot of organizations, and like SE Department of Commerce is infusing a lot more money into these local markets and to help kind of stimulate the startups and scale ups, and I think that's exciting for South Carolina. There are some barriers and just some realities that we face of, you've always heard Quintin, you've always heard the term, or I'm going to test this. Have you heard, a local economy is based on the backbone of small business? Is that something that you've heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you look at, on average, a local economy, 80% of that local economy relies on the backbone of small business. Over the last several years, almost 60% of that 80% is driven by the entrepreneurs, the startups and scale ups in each market. So then you look at, COVID, the blast or the explosion of startups, people starting their own business. I mean, for like women-owned businesses, it was like 30% more women started their own business after the pandemic. So that, so now you look at, whoa, if it was 60% of that 80%, what is it now? I mean, those stats haven't come out yet, but I can only imagine that 60% is probably ticking up higher. And that entrepreneur, that high impact entrepreneur or that scale up is creating more energy, and higher, I would call it a higher impact in every market. So how do we help to make sure that those solopreneurs, how do we get those startups to become a scale up, right? How do we move them along that path so that every business can find that I'll call economic mobility? So there's a lot of energy coming after the pandemic of startups and scale ups, but what we don't want to have happen, I mean, it's hard for a business to last, 5 years. I mean, most drop off after 3 years. So how do we keep those startups going a year in business? How do we keep that startup to be a scale up to hit that 5-year mark? How do we hit that 5-year mark to hit that 15-year mark? So that we're always feeding the local area.
So what was that economic mobility before COVID?
It's pre-COVID. I think it's depending on the industry. And so like high tech, bioscience was probably more thriving. More attention was put there. I think coming out of COVID, I think some of the stats on the barriers for minority and woman-owned businesses, there's been a lot of different programs and resources that have been intentional to support women and minority-owned businesses. And one of the reasons that's part of our mission too is we're telling more diverse stories, whether it's race, gender, or industries, because the broader business media, a lot of the incubators, the accelerators, again, they've kind of find their champion that they, every market kind of has like a handful of champions. They're not necessarily the most diverse. And the more that we can unlock some of those barriers and get the entrepreneurism to look more diverse and tell those stories and unlock the resources available for women and minority-owned businesses, that's where we'll see, I think, a larger or a greater economic mobility because we're becoming economic inclusive.
Now, Jennifer, let me ask you this. How have you, from a professional standpoint and from your business, how has your business been able to find a champion and actually unlock those barriers?
So for Brightco, we're involved in accelerators and incubators, and again, across the country. I was involved with the 10,000 small business with Goldman Sachs. I've done, Start Me programs out of Atlanta. I did the Minority Business Accelerator through the Chamber, which is now a statewide program that's in partnership with Greenville, Columbia, and Charleston Chambers. And really it's developing more confidence, the ability to navigate the resources and tapping into those resources to get the support and the help that I needed to not just grow Brightco, but to help me start OrangeWIP. Like if I didn't go through those programs,
yes, ma'am.
I wouldn't have been able. I didn't have the tools to be able to go, oh, I know what it takes. I got to answer these 30 questions. I've got to set my financial benchmarks in this way. I need to create my cash flow in this manner. I need to invest in these things. And so having those tools that come from a lot of these resources, that unlocks a ton of potential. And I think that's what we find, especially within women and minority-owned businesses, of it is that lack of resources or the lack of knowledge of the resources and having that community that we weren't necessarily born into, or, we one of the questions, like if you talk to an investor or a VC, they're like, well, you got to raise your own capital. Just call, 10 people and ask them for $1 million each. And I'm like, I'm not a part of that network. I don't have that kind of friends. I didn't grow up in that space. And that unfortunately is the reality of how the more resourced people and the more connected people tend to scale faster. And so how do we arm everybody with those same tools and those same resources so everyone can scale?
So what more resources do you want to tap into for your business?
So I'm looking for partners. Our revenue model is through selling advertising and sponsors. So it's native advertising is our platform where we write content, or you come on and you're on a podcast and you're a sponsor of the podcast, and we'll talk about your brand, what do you have to offer the founders and entrepreneurs, and then the platform. How are we telling your story? And it could be video, it could be text and imagery, but it's really building that editorial conversation of what are you looking for? How do we create a stronger connection between you, organization, and the founder and entrepreneur, and be a part of that innovation economy? So that's what we're looking for, of how do I tap into these economic development organizations, and service organizations, and the universities, the attorneys that do trademark protection, or the financial institutions and SBA lenders. Those are who are selling ads to. So that's my goal, is to generate revenue.
And speaking of revenue, let me ask you this, Jennifer. What is the biggest difference between traditional lending versus capital lending?
Well, capital lending is traditional lending. It's more of the, where you're going through a lot of founders and entrepreneurs. Some may have a banking relationship. That's one of the first lessons that you will learn as you go into some of these, these accelerators and incubators. And we talk about it as part of our content, the importance of having a bank relationship or having multiple bank relationships. So you can go in and ask for a loan. Are you preparing your credit, your own personal credit, your business credit in the right way? Just through having a traditional banking relationship, there's a lot of banks that have an SBA department and are specifically geared to support and work with they are there as SBA lenders. There's other organizations like Community Works down in Charleston that also have they have grants, but also they're an SBA lender as well, just in a different, just a different way. And then that's all traditional funding, where you're pursuing capital in a traditional banking relationship. It is a loan base. It is, whatever those rates may be, versus there's other ways of looking for funding, right? There's grants, free money, and there's several grant opportunities within not just South Carolina, but, federally. As even our OrangeWIP, we are pursuing grants, as part of our revenue stream. So that, that's another source of funding. The other way is you're going, I need somebody, I'm willing to give up shares and equity and ownership of my business in some form or fashion, in some form of relationship with an investor. And there's all, that spectrum of that route, can get really complex, and we try to break that down, because there's angel investing, there's, like I said, there's the venture capitalists and the hedge funds, and, and they all look at who they're going to invest in a variety of ways. And so, we featured actually a couple of entrepreneurs down in Charleston, and, they were on our podcast, and just hearing them of how they navigated what they called you're walking into the boardroom and you're asking for money, but there's always a give and take. He said, everyone said it's a win-win. He was like, I look at it as a lose-lose, that we're both two sides of the table. We're going to come together, but we're going to give up a lot. So just helping that founder entrepreneur feel more confident of having those conversations is kind of where we like to play.
Now that we're and COVID is still going on, I want to let people know that, of course. But who do these investors actually invest in these days?
It really depends on the investor. There's a investor down in Charleston. He's based in Charleston. He's a hedge fund, but he is primarily he's an African American male. He owns the hedge fund, but he has based his investment company on investing in Black-owned and women-owned businesses. So that's what he's looking for. So he's kind of taken away all the other non-minority businesses, and he's kind of lasered in of who he wants to help. And he looks at things from a variety of angles. And there's different reasons why they're going to go in, but it's not industry specific. There are other investors that are just tech specific. There are others that are life science specific. There's others that are just looking at high impact entrepreneurs of who's going to scale the fastest. So it's really if you're a founder and entrepreneur looking for investment, know that it's not a one size fits all. So do your homework, go onto OrangeWIP, and you can read some of those of what's the difference between some of these groups, and be able to feel more confident when you're going into that boardroom or making that pitch.
Where was your confidence before OrangeWIP?
Where was mine? I'm a work in progress. So that's one of the reasons I named the business OrangeWIP. Orange is because Brightco, that's our colors. We're marketing, so we always believe in the theory of color. And orange represents forward thinking, solutions, service. And I wanted OrangeWIP to kind of have a nod to Brightco. So that's where the orange, and I feel like I'm always a work in progress, trying to develop my leadership skills, my CEO skills of getting out of being in the business, but trying to work on the business, which is, a founder and entrepreneur's dream. And I feel like that's, when we've had all these conversations with thousands of entrepreneurs and founders across the country, that was a sentiment that kept coming up of the business is always a work in progress. We as individuals, we are always a work in progress. So my confidence, I try to work on it every day. So that's where I am. I'm a work in progress.
Yes, ma'am. And you talked earlier about obviously, minority women businesses, African American businesses, women businesses as well. But programs are there in the state that are actually aimed at promoting minority and women-owned businesses?
Aimed at promoting them, or yes, aimed at helping to support them?
We can do both. Yeah.
So the Chambers organization, both the Greenville, Columbia, and Charleston, they've come together to offer a minority business accelerator. That is really think of it as an MBA, because that's what you learn. It is you are getting an executive MBA, but applied directly to your business. And you're surrounded by coaches and mentors, and it's a year-long program that really helps you, whether you're and it's really for more of, I would say, scale-ups, or businesses that is not for startups that just have an idea on a napkin, right? These are established, whether they've been around for 3 years or 20 years. It's how do we accelerate this business? And they have, so that is a program that's happening in Charleston today. So contact your chamber for that. And that one, there's a couple of incubators and accelerators that they're not necessarily geared to minority, but they, if you go on to OrangeWIP and the directory, there are several down in Charleston that if you just have an idea, and you're trying to figure out, how do I write the business plan? How do I make sure that does this idea, is it really solving a problem that people want to buy, the sellable solution? So those exist. And then Herbert Drayton, he's the hedge fund, fund manager for the investment fund geared to supporting Black and woman-owned founders and entrepreneurs. So look him up on LinkedIn, and connect with him, and have those conversations of what is he looking for. But he's I'm excited that he started it, because he just started it in end of 2020.
That's right.
So he's a new fund.
Yes, as a matter of fact, he was just speaking to the Charleston Rotary Club just a couple of days ago, according to his Instagram page. So that's amazing too. But let me ask you. Oh, no worries. And let me ask you this, Jennifer. I know we have 2:54 left, 2 minutes left, but let me ask you this. So, what is your personal definition in separation between accelerator and incubator?
So, an incubator is, I have an idea, right? I haven't formulated really maybe a business plan, or maybe I have, but I haven't necessarily done anything with it. or maybe it's just a true startup where like I would feel like OrangeWIP might fall into that category a little bit of we're still in our infancy, right? We're still kind of testing our product. We're still getting feedback on our product that we've built, the local platform. But we haven't, we're still scaling as far as revenues, but it's still kind of a startup idea. So that's where an incubator can kind of come in, and there are different incubators. Some are 1 day, kind of, big, just real intense. Others might be 6 weeks. Others might be a year. So it just depends on what you're looking for, but it's really how are we fleshing out that idea and creating a business plan for you to, and most of them kind of the end game of that is you're making a pitch for, somebody to possibly invest in you or to give you grant money. So there's usually some kind of reward at the end of those incubators or those kind of like startup ideation sessions. An accelerator is more of a program that you've kind of already established. You might have been around for a few years, and you're struggling. Maybe you're a solopreneur, but you're not sure if and you're using a bunch of contractors, but should you hire people? What's that point? Or you might have been around for 15 years and you've just stayed steady and you haven't quite done the explosion. Like, how do you scale? Like, I've been 50 people or I've been 200 people for 15 years, but my vision is X. Why can't I get there? That's where an accelerator can come, you come in and you're really taking it's an executive MBA that it is applied and focused on your business